Imagine discovering that your seemingly perfect marriage is actually a facade for something much darker. How would you react upon realizing that the person you trust the most might be your greatest threat? And what if, at the very moment you inherit a multi-million-dollar business empire, it becomes the trigger for your worst nightmare? This is the story of Violet Hartley, a woman who suddenly finds herself fighting not only for control of her company, but also for her own freedom and safety. Stay until the end and get ready for a captivating narrative that will push the boundaries of love, trust, and human resilience with breathtaking twists and turns. The Indianapolis skyline shimmered in the late afternoon sun, a testament to the city's growth and prosperity. Among the gleaming towers stood the headquarters of Hartley Industries, a beacon of innovation and success in the Midwest. Inside the top-floor office, Violet Hartley stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, her honey-colored eyes reflecting the golden light as she surveyed the city below. At 32, she was the picture of elegance and determination, her chestnut hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, her tailored navy suit her armor of professionalism. Violet's mind wandered to the journey that had brought her to this moment. Born and raised in Indianapolis, she had grown up watching her parents build Hartley Industries from the ground up. The company, now valued at over $20 million, was a leader in sustainable technology solutions, a dream her father had pursued with relentless passion. Violet had inherited not just the business, but also the drive and vision that had made it successful. A soft knock on the door interrupted her reverie. "Come in," she called, turning from the window. Her assistant, Sarah, entered with a stack of files. "The quarterly reports you asked for, Ms. Hartley," and Mr. Spencer called again. "He wants to know if you'll be home for dinner." Violet's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Thank you, Sarah. Tell him I'll be working late tonight. There's too much to go over before the board meeting tomorrow." As Sarah left, Violet sank into her leather chair, her fingers tracing the edge of the mahogany desk, her father's desk. The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders like a familiar, if sometimes burdensome, cloak. 5 years ago, when her parents had died in a tragic car accident, Violet had found herself thrust into the role of CEO at just 27. It had been a baptism by fire, learning to navigate the cutthroat world of business while dealing with her own grief. But she had persevered, driven by a desire to honor her parents' legacy and to provide for her younger brother, Jordan. Thoughts of Jordan brought a genuine smile to her face. At 12, he was all gangly limbs and boundless energy, his mind a sponge for knowledge, especially when it came to science and technology. In many ways, he reminded Violet of their father, always curious, always dreaming up the next big innovation. Her reverie was interrupted by the buzz of her phone. A text from Spencer. "Don't work too late. Miss you." Violet stared at the message, a complex mix of emotions swirling in her chest. Spencer, her husband of 5 years, the man who had swept her off her feet when she needed support the most. She remembered their whirlwind romance, how he had seemed like a knight in shining armor during the darkest period of her life. Their first meeting had been at a charity gala, just months after her parents' passing. Spencer had approached her with a glass of champagne and a sympathetic smile. "You look like you could use this," he had said, his blue eyes twinkling. "I'm Spencer Blackwood." Violet had been instantly charmed by his confidence and easy manner. Spencer was everything she thought she needed, strong, decisive, and seemingly supportive of her new role as CEO. Their courtship had been a blur of romantic gestures and whispered promises. When he proposed after just 6 months, Violet had said yes without hesitation, believing she had found her partner in life and business. But now, 5 years into their marriage, Violet found herself questioning everything. The charming smile that had once made her heart race now often felt like a mask, hiding something darker beneath. The strong, supportive husband she thought she had married had gradually revealed himself to be controlling and manipulative. It had started subtly, a comment here, a criticism there. "Are you sure you want to wear that to the board meeting, darling? It might be a bit distracting." Or, "I think you should reconsider that investment strategy. Trust me, I know what I'm talking about." At first, Violet had brushed off these remarks, attributing them to Spencer's desire to help. But as time went on, his behavior became more overt. He began to question her every decision, both personal and professional. He would show up unannounced at her office, ostensibly to take her to lunch, but really to keep tabs on her activities. The worst part was how he had ingratiated himself with the board members, slowly building alliances that often left Violet feeling undermined in her own company. She had begun to notice whispered conversations that would stop abruptly when she entered a room, sidelong glances exchanged during meetings. Violet's thoughts were interrupted by another text from Spencer. "I made reservations at St. Elmo's for 8. Don't be late." She felt a flicker of annoyance at his presumption. Didn't he understand the pressure she was under? The board meeting tomorrow was crucial. They would be discussing the potential acquisition of a promising startup that could revolutionize their clean energy division. With a sigh, Violet turned back to the reports on her desk. She had work to do, Spencer's demands notwithstanding. As she immersed herself in the financial projections, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about the numbers. There were discrepancies that didn't add up, investments that seemed to have materialized out of nowhere. Hours passed as Violet dug deeper into the reports, her unease growing with each page she turned. It was past 9 p.m. when she finally leaned back in her chair, rubbing her tired eyes. The pieces were starting to come together and the picture they formed was troubling. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a call. Spencer's name flashed on the screen. Violet hesitated before answering. "Where are you?" Spencer's voice was cold, controlled anger simmering beneath the surface. "I'm still at the office," Violet replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I told you I had a lot of work to do before tomorrow's meeting." "I made reservations, Violet. I've been sitting here for over an hour looking like a fool. I'm sorry, but this is important. The quarterly reports are not as important as your husband." Spencer cut her off. "I expect you home in 30 minutes. We need to talk." The line went dead before Violet could respond. She stared at the phone, a knot forming in her stomach. There was a time when Spencer's anger would have sent her rushing to appease him, but tonight, something felt different. The discrepancies in the reports, the growing sense of being controlled, it all coalesced into a moment of clarity. Violet stood up, gathering her things with deliberate calm. She wasn't going home, not yet. There was one more person she needed to see first. 20 minutes later, Violet pulled up in front of a modest suburban home. The porch light was on, casting a warm glow over the well-tended front yard. She took a deep breath before getting out of the car and walking to the door. A woman in her late 50s answered, her kind face creasing with concern as she saw Violet. "Violet, is everything all right? Jordan's already in bed. I'm sorry to come by so late, Mrs. Thompson," Violet said to Jordan's nanny. I needed to see him. Do you mind if I go up?" Mrs. Thompson stepped aside, her worried eyes following Violet as she climbed the stairs. Jordan's room was at the end of the hall, the door adorned with posters of planets and famous scientists. Violet eased the door open, slipping inside. Jordan was fast asleep, his dark hair tousled on the pillow, one arm flung out over a book on renewable energy. Light reading for a 12-year-old, Violet thought with a mix of pride and sadness. She sat gently on the edge of the bed, careful not to wake him. In the quiet of the room, watching her little brother sleep, Violet felt tears prick at her eyes. She had worked so hard to protect him, to give him the stable, loving home they had lost when their parents died. But now, as the full weight of her situation with Spencer settled on her shoulders, she realized that she might have put everything at risk. "I'm going to fix this," she whispered, gently brushing a lock of hair from Jordan's forehead. "I promise." As if sensing her presence, Jordan stirred slightly. "Vi," he mumbled, his eyes fluttering open. "Shh, it's okay," Violet soothed. "Go back to sleep. I just came to check on you." "You okay?" Jordan asked, more alert now. Even at his young age, he was perceptive, often picking up on Violet's moods. Violet forced a smile. "I'm fine, just working late. I wanted to see my favorite scientist before heading home." Jordan seemed to accept this, his eyes already heavy with sleep. "Love you, Vi," he murmured as he drifted off again. "Love you too, kiddo," Violet whispered, planting a soft kiss on his forehead before standing up. As she left the Thompsons' house, Violet felt a renewed sense of purpose. The life she had built, the promises she had made to protect Jordan and honor her parents' legacy, it was all hanging in the balance. And Spencer, the man she had once thought would be her partner in all of this, now seemed to be the greatest threat. Sitting in her car, Violet made a decision. She wouldn't be going home tonight. Instead, she pulled out her phone and dialed a number she hadn't used in years. "Nolan? It's Violet Hartley. I'm sorry to call so late, but I need your help. Can we meet?" As she ended the call, Violet took a deep breath. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew one thing for certain. Everything was about to change. The neon sign of the 24-hour diner flickered, casting an eerie blue glow over the nearly empty parking lot. Inside, Violet sat in a corner booth, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had long since gone cold. Her eyes were fixed on the door, watching for any sign of Nolan. As she waited, her mind drifted back to the events that had led her here. The past few months had been a gradual descent into a nightmare she never could have imagined when she first met Spencer. The sound of the bell above the door jolted her back to the present. Nolan Reeves walked in, his eyes scanning the diner, until they landed on Violet. He looked older than she remembered, his salt and pepper hair a testament to the years that had passed since they last spoke. But his eyes were as sharp and kind as ever. "Violet," he said softly as he slid into the booth across from her. "It's been a long time." Violet managed a weak smile. "Thank you for coming, Nolan. I didn't know who else to turn to." Nolan's brow furrowed with concern. "What's going on? Your call sounded urgent." Violet took a deep breath, steeling herself. "It's about the company, and Spencer. I think he's been embezzling funds, and I'm afraid of what he might do if he finds out I know." Nolan leaned back, his expression grave. "Start from the beginning. Tell me everything." And so, Violet began to unravel the tangled web of deceit and manipulation that her life had become. She told Nolan about the discrepancies she'd found in the financial reports, about Spencer's growing control over her personal and professional life, about the subtle threats and not-so-subtle intimidation. "Last week," Violet said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I confronted him about a suspicious transfer of funds. He grabbed my arm so hard it left bruises. Then he said if I ever questioned him again, Jordan might have an accident at school." Nolan's face darkened with anger. "Violet, this is serious. Have you considered going to the police?" Violet shook her head, fear evident in her eyes. "I can't risk it. Spencer has connections everywhere. If he found out I was talking to anyone, I can't even imagine what he might do to Jordan." As they talked, Violet began to see the full extent of Spencer's manipulation. He had gradually isolated her from friends and colleagues, always under the guise of protecting her or the company's interests. He had charmed the board members, slowly building alliances that often left Violet feeling undermined in her own company. "He's even managed to turn some of the employees against me," Violet said, frustration evident in her voice. "Last month I overheard my assistant, Sarah, talking to him on the phone. She was telling him about my schedule, who I'd been meeting with. I can't trust anyone anymore." Nolan listened intently, his mind clearly working to process all the information. "We need to be strategic about this, Violet. Spencer's got his hooks deep into the company. We can't just confront him outright." As they discussed potential courses of action, the bell above the door chimed again. Violet's head snapped up, her body tensing instinctively. A wave of relief washed over her when she saw it was just a tired-looking truck driver coming in for a late-night meal. "This is what I'm talking about," Violet said, her voice shaky. "I'm constantly on edge. I feel like I'm always looking over my shoulder, waiting for the other shoe to drop." Nolan reached across the table, gently placing his hand over hers. "You're not alone in this anymore, Violet. We'll figure it out together." As they continued to talk, Violet felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in months. But she knew the road ahead would be difficult and dangerous. The next few weeks were a delicate balancing act for Violet. By day, she maintained the facade of a happily married, successful CEO. She attended board meetings, made public appearances, and tried to keep Spencer's suspicions at bay. But in secret, she worked with Nolan to gather evidence of Spencer's financial misdeeds. One evening, as Violet was working late in her office, Spencer made an unexpected appearance. He sauntered in, a bouquet of roses in one hand and a bottle of champagne in the other. "Surprise, darling," he said, his charming smile firmly in place. "I thought we could celebrate your hard work." Violet felt her heart rate quicken, but she forced a smile. "That's sweet of you, Spencer, but I really need to finish these reports." Spencer's smile faltered for a moment, a flash of anger in his eyes. "Always working, aren't you? One might think you're avoiding your husband." He set the champagne down on her desk with a little too much force, causing Violet to flinch. Spencer noticed, and his expression softened, though the warmth didn't reach his eyes. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I just miss you. How about we open this bottle and you can tell me all about these important reports?" Violet knew she couldn't refuse without raising suspicion. As Spencer poured the champagne, she surreptitiously slipped the flash drive containing the evidence she and Nolan had gathered into her purse. The next hour was torturous for Violet. She sipped her champagne slowly, trying to keep her wits about her as Spencer probed for information about her recent activities. His questions seemed casual, but Violet could sense the underlying current of suspicion. "You've been spending a lot of time with the finance team lately," Spencer remarked, swirling the champagne in his glass. "Anything I should know about?" Violet's mind raced. "Just standard quarterly reviews, you know how it is. Always looking for ways to improve efficiency." Spencer's eyes narrowed slightly. "Of course. And that old friend of yours, Nolan, was it? I heard he's been hanging around the office. Bit odd for someone who left the company years ago, don't you think?" Violet felt a chill run down her spine. How did he know about Nolan? She forced herself to remain calm. "He's been consulting on a new project. His expertise has been invaluable." Spencer set down his glass, his movements deliberate. He moved around the desk, coming to stand behind Violet's chair. She could feel the heat of his body, smell the expensive cologne he wore. His hands came to rest on her shoulders, squeezing just a little too hard. "Violet, darling," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You know you can trust me, don't you? We're partners in this, in everything." Violet swallowed hard, fighting the urge to pull away from his touch. "Of course, Spencer. Always." She could feel his breath on her neck as he leaned down to whisper in her ear. "Good. Because I'd hate for anything to come between us, or for anything to happen to that bright young brother of yours. It would be a shame if his promising future was cut short." Violet felt her blood run cold. The threat was clear, and it took every ounce of her willpower not to react. She turned to face Spencer, forcing a smile. "Nothing could come between us, Spencer. You know that." Spencer's face broke into a wide grin, but his eyes remained cold. "Excellent. Now why don't you pack up and come home? I think we both deserve an early night." As they left the office, Violet's mind was racing. She needed to act fast, but she had to be careful. One wrong move and everything could come crashing down. The next day, Violet met Nolan in a secluded corner of a local park. The sound of children playing on a nearby playground provided cover for their conversation. "He knows something," Violet said, her voice tight with anxiety. "He mentioned you last night, asked why you've been around the office." Nolan's expression was grim. "We need to move faster. I've been going through the financial records you provided. Violet, the extent of his embezzlement, it's staggering. He's siphoned off millions." Violet felt a wave of nausea. "How could I have been so blind?" Nolan shook his head. "Don't blame yourself. Spencer is a master manipulator. But now we have the evidence. We need to take this to the authorities." "But what about Jordan?" Violet's voice cracked. "Spencer's threats weren't subtle last night. I'm terrified of what he might do." Nolan thought for a moment. "We need to get Jordan somewhere safe first. Do you have any family out of state?" Violet nodded slowly. "My aunt in California. Jordan loves visiting her." "Good. We'll arrange for him to go there. Make it seem like a normal visit. Once he's safe, we can make our move." As they finalized their plans, Violet felt a mix of fear and determination. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in years, she felt like she was taking control of her life again. Over the next week, Violet carefully laid the groundwork for their plan. She arranged for Jordan to visit their aunt, framing it as a reward for his excellent grades. Spencer, always eager to maintain the image of a caring stepfather, readily agreed. The day Jordan left for California, Violet felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Knowing he was out of Spencer's reach gave her the courage to take the next step. That evening, as she and Spencer sat down to dinner, Violet steeled herself for what was to come. She had barely touched her food, her stomach in knots. "Spencer," she began, her voice steadier than she felt, "we need to talk about the company." Spencer looked up from his plate, his expression unreadable. "Oh, what about it?" Violet took a deep breath. "I know about the embezzlement. I have proof of everything you've done." For a moment, the only sound in the room was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Then, Spencer's face contorted with rage. In one swift motion, he stood up, sending his chair crashing to the floor. "You ungrateful bitch," he snarled, advancing around the table towards her. "After everything I've done for you, for this company." Violet stood her ground even as her heart raced. "It's over, Spencer. I'm going to the police. You can't threaten or manipulate your way out of this." Spencer's hand shot out, grabbing Violet's arm with bruising force. "You think you can stand against me?" I built you up, Violet. I can tear you down just as easily. Despite her fear, Violet felt a surge of defiance. No, Spencer. My parents built this company. I've worked tirelessly to continue their legacy. You're nothing but a parasite, feeding off the success of others. With a roar of anger, Spencer shoved Violet hard. She stumbled backwards, her hip catching the edge of the sideboard. Pain shot through her, but she refused to show weakness. You're making a big mistake, Violet, Spencer growled, his face twisted with fury. Think about Jordan. Think about what could happen to him if you pursue this. For a moment, fear gripped Violet's heart. But then she remembered that Jordan was safe, out of Spencer's reach. She straightened up, meeting Spencer's gaze with steely determination. You'll never touch Jordan again, she said, her voice low and dangerous. It's over, Spencer. Walk away now, or I'll make sure you spend the rest of your life in prison. Something in Violet's tone must have gotten through to Spencer. He took a step back, his eyes darting around the room as if looking for an escape route. How you'll regret this, Violet, he said, his voice cold. You have no idea what I'm capable of. With that, he stormed out of the dining room. Moments later, Violet heard the front door slam shut. As the adrenaline wore off, Violet sank into a chair, her body shaking. She pulled out her phone and dialed Nolan's number. It's done, she said when he answered. Spencer knows I'm onto him. We need to move fast. Nolan's voice was calm and reassuring. I've already contacted the authorities. They're on their way to your house now. Stay where you are, Violet. It's almost over. As she hung up the phone, Violet looked around the dining room. The overturned chair, the scattered silverware. It was all evidence of the violence that had been simmering beneath the surface of her marriage for years. But as she heard the distant wail of police sirens, Violet felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead would be difficult, she knew. There would be legal battles, public scrutiny, and the long process of rebuilding her life and her company. But for the first time in years, Violet felt free. She had faced her greatest fear and come out stronger. As she waited for the police to arrive, Violet made a silent promise to herself and to Jordan. They would rebuild their lives, stronger and happier than before, and she would never again let anyone take away her power or her voice. The next few hours passed in a blur of police statements and evidence collection. Violet recounted every detail of Spencer's abuse and financial crimes, her voice growing stronger with each word. As the sun began to rise, casting a warm glow through the windows, Violet felt as if she was emerging from a long, dark nightmare. Nolan arrived at the house just as the police were wrapping up their initial investigation. His face was a mix of concern and relief as he approached Violet. "Are you all right?" he asked, his eyes scanning her for any signs of injury. Violet nodded, feeling exhausted but resolute. "I'm okay. It's over." Nolan placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You did it, Violet. You stood up to him. But this is just the beginning. We have a lot of work ahead of us to set things right at the company." Violet straightened her shoulders, a determined glint in her eye. "Then let's get started. It's time to reclaim what's rightfully mine." As they walked out of the house together, Violet paused for a moment to look back. The home that had been her prison for so long now seemed small and insignificant. She took a deep breath of the fresh morning air, feeling as if she could finally breathe freely again. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Spencer had gone into hiding, but his disappearance only served to confirm his guilt in the eyes of the authorities. Violet worked tirelessly with Nolan and a team of forensic accountants to unravel the full extent of Spencer's financial crimes. The revelations sent shockwaves through Indianapolis's business community. Many of Spencer's allies on the board quickly distanced themselves, eager to avoid being implicated in the scandal. Violet faced each challenge head-on, her resolve strengthening with each obstacle overcome. 2 weeks after her confrontation with Spencer, Violet stood before the board of directors, her head held high. The room was tense, filled with a mix of shame, anger, and uncertainty. "Ladies and gentlemen," Violet began, her voice clear and confident, "we stand at a crossroads. The actions of one man have threatened to destroy everything my parents built, everything we've all worked so hard to achieve. But I stand before you today, not in defeat, but in determination. We will rebuild. We will regain the trust of our shareholders, our employees, and our community, and we will emerge stronger than ever." As she laid out her plan for the company's future, Violet could see the shift in the room. The doubt and suspicion that had clouded their eyes for months began to clear. replaced by a growing respect and renewed faith in her leadership. By the end of the meeting, Violet had not only secured her position as CEO, but had also gained the full support of the board in her efforts to reform the company's governance and financial practices. As she left the boardroom, Violet felt a weight lift from her shoulders. There was still much to be done, but for the first time in years, she felt truly in control of her destiny. That evening, Violet made a video call to Jordan in California. His face lit up the screen, his eyes bright with excitement as he regaled her with stories of his adventures with their aunt. "When are you coming to visit, Vi?" he asked, his voice filled with eager anticipation. Violet smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "Soon, kiddo, I promise. And when I do, we'll have a lot to talk about. Things are going to be different from now on. Better." As she ended the call, Violet looked out her office window at the Indianapolis skyline. The city lights twinkled in the darkness, full of promise and possibility. She thought about the long road ahead, the legal battles, the process of rebuilding the company's reputation, the personal healing she would need to undertake. But for the first time in years, Violet felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. She had reclaimed her voice, her power, and her future, and she knew, deep in her heart, that the best was yet to come. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the polished marble floors of the Hartley Industries lobby as Violet strode through the main entrance. The security guard at the desk straightened up, offering a respectful nod. "Good morning, Miss Hartley." "Good morning, Frank," Violet replied, her voice carrying a newfound confidence. It had been 3 months since the night she confronted Spencer, and each day since had been a step towards reclaiming her life and her company. As the elevator doors closed behind her, Violet allowed herself a moment of reflection. The past few months had been a whirlwind of legal depositions, board meetings, and late nights poring over financial records. But through it all, she had discovered a strength within herself that she never knew existed. The ding of the elevator reaching the top floor brought her back to the present. As she walked towards her office, she noticed her assistant, Sarah, waiting nervously by the door. "Good morning, Sarah," Violet said, her tone professional but not unkind. "Is everything all right?" Sarah fidgeted with the folder in her hands. "Miss Hartley, I wanted to apologize for everything. I should have never helped Mr. Blackwood behind your back. I was afraid and I made the wrong choice. I understand if you want me to resign." Violet studied the young woman for a moment. She remembered the anger and betrayal she had felt upon discovering Sarah's involvement in Spencer's schemes. But now, looking at her assistant's genuine remorse, Violet felt a surge of compassion. "Sarah," Violet began, her voice softening, "what Spencer did affected all of us. He manipulated and threatened people to get what he wanted. While I can't forget what happened, I believe in second chances. If you're willing to rebuild that trust, I'm willing to give you that opportunity." Sarah's eyes widened in surprise, then filled with tears of relief. "Thank you, Miss Hartley. I promise I won't let you down." As Sarah hurried back to her desk, Violet entered her office feeling a small sense of victory. It was moments like these, choosing compassion over anger, trust over suspicion, that made her realize how much she had grown. Her moment of reflection was interrupted by a knock at the door. Nolan entered, a stack of documents under his arm, and a grim expression on his face. "Morning, Violet," he said, closing the door behind him. "We need to talk about the divorce proceedings." Violet felt a familiar knot form in her stomach. Despite everything Spencer had done, the idea of officially ending their marriage still filled her with a complex mix of emotions. She gestured for Nolan to take a seat. "What's the latest?" she asked, steeling herself for whatever news he brought. Nolan spread the documents on her desk. "Spencer's lawyers are playing hardball. They're claiming that his financial discrepancies were all done with your knowledge and approval. They're threatening to drag your name through the mud if you don't agree to a settlement that would essentially give him half the company." Violet felt a surge of anger. Even now, Spencer was trying to manipulate and control her, but this time she was ready to fight back. "No," she said, her voice firm. "I won't let him threaten me anymore. We have the evidence of his crimes. If he wants to play dirty, we'll be ready." Nolan nodded, a hint of pride in his eyes. "I thought you might say that. I've already started preparing our counter-strategy, but Violet, you should know, this is going to get ugly. Are you sure you're ready for what's coming?" Violet stood up, walking to the window that overlooked the city. For a moment she thought about Jordan, safely away from all of this in California. She thought about her parents and the legacy they had built. She thought about all the employees who depended on her leadership. Turning back to Nolan, her eyes blazed with determination. "I'm ready. Spencer took so much from me, my confidence, my sense of safety, years of my life. But he won't take my company or my future. Not anymore." Nolan stood, gathering the documents. "All right then, I'll inform our legal team to proceed with the aggressive strategy. And Violet," he added, his voice softening slightly, "for what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Your parents would be proud." As Nolan left, Violet felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She allowed herself a moment to feel it all, the fear, the anger, the sadness, but also the hope and determination. Then, taking a deep breath, she turned to her computer. There was work to be done. Over the next few weeks, the divorce proceedings dominated Violet's life. Each day brought new challenges, from heated negotiations with Spencer's lawyers to damage control as details of their troubled marriage leaked to the press. One particularly grueling day, after a marathon session with her legal team, Violet found herself sitting alone in her office long after everyone else had gone home. The city lights twinkled beyond her window, a stark contrast to the darkness she felt closing in around her. A soft knock on the door startled her from her thoughts. To her surprise, it was Nolan, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need this," he said, offering her a cup as he sat down across from her desk. Violet accepted the coffee gratefully, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "Thanks, Nolan. What are you still doing here so late?" Nolan shrugged, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Someone has to make sure the CEO doesn't work herself to death. Besides, I had a feeling you could use a friendly face." For a moment, they sat in comfortable silence, sipping their coffee. Violet found herself studying Nolan's face, the lines around his eyes that crinkled when he smiled, the touch of grey at his temples that somehow made him look distinguished rather than old. She realized with a start that this was the first time in months she had looked at a man without feeling fear or suspicion. "How do you do it, Nolan?" she asked suddenly. "How do you stay so steady through all of this?" Nolan set down his coffee, his expression thoughtful. "I suppose I've learned over the years that the only way through a storm is to keep moving forward. And," he added, his eyes meeting hers, "it helps to have something or someone worth fighting for." Violet felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to imagine a future beyond the current struggles. A future where she could trust again, maybe even love again. The moment was broken by the buzzing of her phone. Violet glanced at the screen and felt her heart skip a beat. It was Jordan. "I should take this," she said apologetically to Nolan. He nodded understandingly, standing to leave. "Of course. Good night, Violet. Try to get some rest, okay?" As the door closed behind him, Violet answered the call. "Jordan, is everything okay?" Her brother's voice came through, tinged with worry. "Vi, I saw the news. They're saying all these awful things about you and Spencer. What's going on?" Violet closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She had been dreading this conversation, wanting to protect Jordan from the ugliness of the situation, but she knew he deserved the truth. "Jordan, there's a lot I need to tell you," she began. "Things with Spencer, they weren't what they seemed. He did some bad things and now we're getting a divorce." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Jordan spoke again, his voice was small, vulnerable. "Is that why you sent me to Aunt Claire's, to keep me away from all this?" Violet felt her heart break a little. "Partly, yes. I wanted you to be safe while I sorted everything out. I'm so sorry I kept you in the dark, Jordan. I was trying to protect you, but I realize now that wasn't fair to you." "I'm not a kid anymore, Vi," Jordan said, a hint of frustration in his voice. "I could have handled it. I could have been there for you." Violet felt tears prick at her eyes. "You're right, and I'm sorry. From now on, I promise to be honest with you about everything. No more secrets." Over the next hour, Violet told Jordan everything: Spencer's abuse, the embezzlement, the ongoing legal battle. She answered his questions as honestly as she could, even when the truth was painful. By the end of the call, Violet felt emotionally drained but also lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Jordan's final words stayed with her long after they had said goodnight. "I'm proud of you, Vi," he had said, his voice full of admiration. "You're the strongest person I know, and when I come home, we'll face whatever comes next together." As Violet finally left her office that night, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead was still long and fraught with challenges, But she no longer felt alone on the journey. The next few months were a roller coaster of highs and lows. The divorce proceedings dragged on, with Spencer's team employing every dirty tactic they could think of. There were days when Violet felt like she was fighting an uphill battle against an avalanche. But for every setback, there were moments of triumph. Slowly but surely, she was rebuilding Hartley Industries' reputation. New contracts were signed, innovative projects were launched, and the company's stock began to recover. One crisp autumn morning, Violet stood before her bathroom mirror, adjusting her suit jacket. Today was the final day of divorce court, and she was determined to face it with her head held high. As she smoothed down her hair, her eyes caught on something she hadn't noticed before, a strand of grey at her temple. For a moment she stared at it, remembering how she used to frantically pluck out any sign of aging, terrified of losing Spencer's approval. Now, looking at that silver strand, she felt a surge of pride. It was a badge of honor, proof of all she had survived and overcome. With a small smile, she left it where it was and headed out the door. The courtroom was packed as Violet took her seat beside her lawyer. She could feel Spencer's eyes boring into her from across the aisle, but she refused to give him the satisfaction of looking his way. Instead, she focused on the judge, her posture straight, her expression composed. As the final arguments were presented, Violet allowed her mind to wander to the future. She thought about the plans she had for the company, the new life she was building for herself and Jordan. For the first time in years, she felt genuinely excited about what lay ahead. The bang of the judge's gavel brought her attention back to the present. In the matter of Hartley versus Blackwood, this court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Violet Hartley. A wave of emotion washed over Violet, relief, triumph, and a bittersweet sense of closure. It was over. She was free. As she stood to leave the courtroom, she finally allowed herself to look at Spencer. Their eyes met, and for a moment she saw a flicker of the man she had once loved, lost, angry, and ultimately powerless. But then his face hardened into a mask of cold fury, and he turned away. Outside the courthouse, a crowd of reporters had gathered. Violet took a deep breath, preparing to face them, but before she could step forward, she felt a hand on her arm. It was Nolan. "You don't have to do this now," he said softly. "We can issue a statement later." Violet smiled, patting his hand gratefully. "Thank you, Nolan, but I'm ready. It's time to tell my side of the story." As she approached the microphones, Violet felt a sense of calm settle over her. This was her moment to reclaim her narrative, to show the world who she truly was. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice clear and strong. "Today marks the end of a difficult chapter in my life, but also the beginning of a new one. I stand before you not as a victim, but as a survivor." As Violet spoke, laying out her vision for the future of Hartley Industries and her commitment to using her experience to help other survivors of domestic abuse, she could feel the energy of the crowd shift. The skepticism and curiosity in their eyes gave way to respect and even admiration. When she finished, there was a moment of silence before the questions began. Violet answered each one with poise and honesty, no longer afraid to speak her truth. As the impromptu press conference wound down, Violet felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to find Sarah, her assistant, looking both excited and nervous. "Ms. Hartley, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a call you need to take. It's Jordan. He's at the airport. He's come home." Violet's heart leapt. She quickly excused herself from the reporters and hurried to her car, Nolan close behind. The drive to the airport was a blur of emotion. As they pulled up to the arrivals area, Violet spotted Jordan immediately. He had grown taller in the months he'd been away, his face a little leaner, looking more like a young man than the boy she remembered. As soon as he saw her, Jordan broke into a run. Violet met him halfway, enveloping him in a tight hug. "I saw you on TV," Jordan said, his voice muffled against her shoulder. "You were amazing, Vi. I knew you'd win." Violet pulled back, cupping his face in her hands. "Having you here makes the victory complete. Welcome home, kiddo." As they walked back to the car, Jordan chattering excitedly about his plans now that he was back, Violet caught Nolan's eye over her brother's head. The look that passed between them was one of shared understanding and something more, a promise of possibilities yet to unfold. That evening, as Violet sat on her porch watching the sunset with Jordan beside her and Nolan's steady presence just inside, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years. The road ahead was still uncertain, But for the first time in a long time, she was excited to see where it might lead. But even as she basked in the warmth of her newfound freedom and hope, a small part of Violet remained vigilant. She knew Spencer well enough to know that he wouldn't accept defeat gracefully. This victory, sweet as it was, might only be the calm before another storm. As if sensing her thoughts, Jordan squeezed her hand. "Whatever happens next, Vi, we'll face it together." Violet squeezed back, her resolve strengthening. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was ready. She had reclaimed her voice, her power, and her future, and this time, nothing and no one would take them away again. The rhythmic tapping of Violet's heels echoed through the corridors of Hartley Industries as she made her way to the boardroom. 6 months had passed since the finalization of her divorce, and each day brought new challenges and triumphs. As she approached the double doors, she caught her reflection in the polished surface. The woman staring back at her exuded a quiet confidence that had been hard-won over the past year. Taking a deep breath, Violet pushed open the doors and strode into the room. The board members, once wary and skeptical of her leadership, now stood as she entered, a sign of respect that didn't go unnoticed. "Good morning, everyone," Violet said, her voice clear and authoritative. "Let's get started." As the meeting progressed, Violet presented her vision for the company's expansion into sustainable energy solutions. Her passion was evident as she laid out the plans, fielding questions with ease and addressing concerns with well-thought-out solutions. "Ms. Hartley," one of the older board members spoke up, "I must admit I had my doubts about this direction initially, but the way you've outlined this strategy, it's impressive. You've clearly done your homework." Violet allowed herself a small smile. "Thank you, Mr. Jameson. I believe this is not just good for our bottom line, but also for our community and the planet. Hartley Industries has always been about innovation and progress. It's time we lead the charge in sustainable technology." As the meeting concluded, Violet felt a sense of accomplishment. It hadn't been easy to win back the trust of the board, but moments like these proved she was on the right track. Leaving the boardroom, she found Nolan waiting for her in the hallway, a warm smile on his face. "Knocked it out of the park as usual," he said, falling into step beside her. Violet chuckled, feeling a flutter in her stomach that she was becoming increasingly aware of whenever Nolan was around. "It went well, but we still have a long road ahead. The transition to sustainable tech won't be easy." "True," Nolan agreed, "but if anyone can make it happen, it's you." They reached Violet's office and she hesitated for a moment before asking, "Do you have time for a coffee? There's something I wanted to discuss." Nolan's eyebrows raised slightly, but he nodded. "Of course." Once inside, Violet closed the door and moved to the small coffee machine in the corner of her office. As she prepared their drinks, she gathered her thoughts. "Nolan," she began, turning to face him, "I wanted to thank you for everything you've done over the past year. I couldn't have gotten through it all without you." Nolan accepted the coffee cup, his eyes never leaving hers. "You're stronger than you give yourself credit for, Violet. I just provided a little support along the way." Violet shook her head, a soft smile playing on her lips. "It was more than a little. You've been my rock, my sounding board, my—" She trailed off, suddenly unsure of how to express the complex emotions she'd been grappling with. Nolan set his cup down, taking a step closer to her. "You're what, Violet?" The air between them seemed to crackle with unspoken tension. Violet found herself lost in Nolan's warm brown eyes, seeing in them a depth of caring that both thrilled and terrified her. "I don't know," she admitted softly. "And that scares me. After Spencer, I thought I'd never be able to trust anyone again. But with you," Nolan reached out, gently taking her hand in his. "Violet, I would never pressure you or rush you into anything you're not ready for. Whatever this is between us, we can take it as slow as you need." Violet felt tears prick at her eyes, overwhelmed by the tenderness in his voice. "Thank you," she whispered, squeezing his hand. The moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. They stepped apart as Sarah entered, looking apologetic. "I'm sorry to interrupt, Miss Hartley, but there's an urgent call from Jordan's school." Violet's heart rate spiked. "Put it through right away." As she moved to answer the phone, Nolan quietly excused himself, giving her a reassuring nod as he left. "This is Violet Hartley," she said into the receiver, trying to keep the worry from her voice. "Ms. Hartley, this is Principal Simmons from Westfield High. There's been an incident involving Jordan. He's okay, but we need you to come down to the school immediately." Violet's mind raced as she drove to the school. Since returning from California, Jordan had thrown himself into his studies, seeming to thrive. What could have happened? As she walked into the principal's office, she found Jordan sitting in a chair, his head down, knuckles bruised. Principal Simmons, a stern-looking woman in her 50s, gestured for Violet to take a seat. "Miss Hartley, thank you for coming so quickly. I'm afraid Jordan was involved in a physical altercation with another student today." Violet turned to her brother, shocked. "Jordan, what happened?" Jordan looked up, his eyes a mix of anger and shame. "He was saying things, Vi, about you, about us. Saying that you were just like Spencer, that you'd run the company into the ground. I couldn't just stand there and let him talk like that." Violet felt a pang in her chest. She had tried so hard to shield Jordan from the fallout of her divorce, but it was clear that the repercussions were reaching him anyway. "Jordan," she said softly, "I appreciate you wanting to defend me, but violence is never the answer. We're better than that." Principal Simmons cleared her throat. "Given Jordan's clean record up until now, we're willing to let this go with a week's suspension, but any further incidents will have more severe consequences." As they left the school, Violet's mind was a whirlwind of emotions. She had been so focused on rebuilding the company and her own life that she had underestimated the impact all of this was having on Jordan. That evening, after a long talk with Jordan about healthier ways to deal with his emotions, Violet found herself on her back porch, a glass of wine in hand. The events of the day weighed heavily on her mind. Her phone buzzed with a text from Nolan. "Hope everything's okay with Jordan. If you need to talk, I'm here." Violet smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. She was about to reply when another text came through, this one making her blood run cold. Unknown. Number. "You think you've won, Violet? This is just the beginning. Watch your back." Her hands shaking, Violet immediately called her lawyer. As she relayed the message, her lawyer's voice was grim. "This is a clear threat, Violet. We need to take this to the police. And I hate to say it, but given the timing and content, it's likely from Spencer." Violet felt a chill run down her spine. She had known deep down that Spencer wouldn't go quietly, but facing the reality of his continued threat was terrifying. The next few weeks were a balancing act of managing the company, supporting Jordan through his suspension, and dealing with the increased security measures her lawyer had insisted upon. Through it all, Nolan remained a steady presence, offering support without pressure. One evening, as they worked late in her office, Violet found herself opening up to him about her fears. "Sometimes I wonder if it will ever truly be over," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "If I'll ever be free of Spencer's shadow." Nolan moved from his chair to sit beside her on the small office sofa. "Violet, look at me," he said gently. When she met his eyes, he continued, "You are one of the strongest, most resilient people I've ever met. Spencer may think he still has power over you, but the truth is, you've already won. You're rebuilding this company. You're an amazing sister to Jordan, and you're inspiring everyone around you." Violet felt tears well up in her eyes. "How do you always know exactly what to say?" Nolan smiled softly, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. "Because I see you, Violet. The real you. And she's incredible." In that moment, Violet made a decision. Leaning forward, she pressed her lips to Nolan's in a soft, tentative kiss. When she pulled back, she saw a mix of surprise and joy in his eyes. "I'm still scared," she admitted, "but I don't want fear to hold me back anymore, not from the company, not from life, and not from this." Nolan cupped her face gently. "We'll take it one day at a time, together." As the weeks turned into months, Violet found herself settling into a new rhythm. The company's shift towards sustainable technology was gaining traction, attracting positive press and new investors. Jordan had returned to school with a renewed focus, joining the debate team as a constructive outlet for his passionate nature. And then there was Nolan. Their relationship had blossomed slowly, built on a foundation of trust and mutual respect. Violet was learning to open her heart again, to allow herself to be vulnerable without fear of being hurt. But even as life seemed to be falling into place, the threat from Spencer loomed in the background. The threatening texts had continued sporadically, each one a stark reminder that her ex-husband was still out there, plotting his revenge. It all came to a head on a crisp autumn evening. Violet was working late, putting the finishing touches on a presentation for a major potential investor. As she shut down her computer and gathered her things, she heard a noise in the outer office. "Sarah?" she called out, assuming her assistant had also stayed late. When there was no response, Violet felt a prickle of unease. Cautiously, she moved towards her office door. As she reached for the handle, it suddenly swung open, revealing Spencer standing there, his eyes wild with anger and something else, desperation. "Hello, Violet," he snarled, pushing his way into the office. "Miss me?" Violet stumbled backward, her heart pounding. "Spencer, what are you doing here? You're violating the restraining order." Spencer laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "Oh, you mean this piece of paper?" He pulled out the restraining order, crumpling it and tossing it aside. "It's amazing how easy it is to get past security when you know the right people. You didn't think you could just take everything from me and walk away, did you?" Violet's mind raced, trying to find a way out of this situation. Her phone was in her purse on the other side of the room. The panic button under her desk seemed miles away. "Spencer, please," she said, trying to keep her voice calm. "Whatever you're thinking of doing, it's not too late to stop. Think about the consequences." "Consequences?" Spencer spat. "I've lost everything because of you. My reputation, my money, my future. You've left me with nothing to lose." As he advanced towards her, Violet saw a flash of metal in his hand. A knife. Terror gripped her, but beneath it, a spark of defiance ignited. She was not the same woman who had cowered before him all those years. She had fought too hard, come too far to let him win now. In a split-second decision, Violet grabbed the heavy crystal paperweight from her desk and hurled it at Spencer. It caught him off guard, striking his hand and sending the knife clattering to the floor. Taking advantage of his momentary shock, Violet lunged for the panic button, slamming her hand down on it. Alarms blared throughout the building. Spencer, realizing his plan was falling apart, made a desperate grab for Violet. But she was ready this time. Years of pent-up anger and fear exploded out of her as she fought back, landing a solid punch to his jaw. The sound of running footsteps echoed in the hallway. Moments later, security burst into the office, quickly subduing Spencer. As he was being led away, Spencer turned to Violet, his face a mask of hatred. "This isn't over, Violet. I'll never stop coming for you." Violet stood tall, meeting his gaze without flinching. "Yes, it is over, Spencer. You have no power over me anymore. I'm not afraid of you." As the police arrived and began taking statements, Violet felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. She had faced her worst fear and come out victorious. Spencer's final, desperate act had only served to prove how far she had come. Nolan arrived at the office just as Violet was finishing up with the police. His face was etched with worry as he rushed to her side. "Violet, thank God you're all right," he said, pulling her into a tight embrace. "When I got the call, I thought—" Violet hugged him back, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "I'm okay, Nolan. Really. For the first time in a long time, I think I'm truly okay." As they left the office together, Violet paused to look back at the place where her life had nearly ended, but where she had instead found the strength to truly begin anew. She turned to Nolan, a small smile playing on her lips. "Let's go home," she said softly. In the days that followed, Violet found herself re-evaluating everything. The attack, terrifying as it had been, had also been oddly freeing. She had stood up to her greatest fear and emerged stronger for it. At a press conference addressing the incident, Violet spoke not just as a CEO, but as a survivor. "What happened to me is not unique," she said, her voice steady and clear. "Countless women face similar struggles every day. It's time we break the silence, time we stand together against abuse in all its forms. Hartley Industries will be partnering with local women's shelters and advocacy groups to provide support and resources for survivors." The response was overwhelming. Messages of support poured in from around the country. Women reached out to share their own stories, inspired by Violet's courage. In the midst of it all, Violet found moments of quiet joy. Evenings spent helping Jordan with his debate preparations. Weekend brunches with Nolan, where they talked for hours about everything and nothing. Late nights at the office where the work didn't feel like work because she was pursuing her passion. 6 months after the attack, Violet stood on a stage at a tech conference, presenting Hartley Industries' latest innovation in sustainable energy. As she spoke about the future, a future of clean power, of technology that helped rather than harmed, she felt a sense of purpose that went beyond profit margins and stock prices. "We have the power to shape the world we want to live in," she concluded, her eyes scanning the packed auditorium. "At Hartley Industries, we're committed to building a future that's not just profitable, but sustainable and equitable. A future where everyone has the chance to thrive." The applause was thunderous. As Violet stepped off the stage, She caught sight of Nolan in the wings, his face beaming with pride, and she knew in that moment that whatever challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them, not just as a survivor, but as a leader, an innovator, and a woman fully coming into her own power. The journey hadn't been easy, and there would undoubtedly be more obstacles to overcome, but Violet Hartley was no longer afraid of the fight. She had found her voice, her strength, and her purpose, and she was just getting started. The Indianapolis skyline glittered against the night sky, a testament to the city's growth and prosperity. From her penthouse apartment, Violet Hartley gazed out at the urban landscape, her reflection ghostly in the floor-to-ceiling windows. The woman staring back at her was a far cry from the trembling, uncertain figure of 2 years ago. Her honey-colored eyes now held a steely determination, her posture radiating confidence and strength. A gentle hand on her shoulder pulled her from her reverie. Nolan stood beside her, his warm presence a comfort she had come to rely on. "Big day tomorrow," he said softly. "Are you ready?" Violet took a deep breath, turning to face him. "As ready as I'll ever be. This merger could change everything, Nolan. Not just for Hartley Industries, but for sustainable energy across the country." Nolan's eyes crinkled with a mixture of pride and concern. "You've worked incredibly hard for this, Violet. But remember, no matter what happens tomorrow, you've already achieved so much." She nodded, leaning into his embrace. As they stood there, overlooking the city, Violet's mind wandered to the journey that had brought her to this moment. The abuse, the betrayal, the long fight to reclaim her company and her life. It all seemed like a lifetime ago. And yet, the lessons learned, the strength gained, were what had propelled her to this pivotal juncture. The next morning dawned bright and clear, as if the universe itself was offering its blessing. Violet strode into Hartley Industries headquarters, her tailored suit a armor of professionalism, her high heels clicking a rhythm of determination on the marble floors. As she entered the conference room, a hush fell over the assembled board members and executives. Among them sat the representatives from Green Tech Solutions, the company Hartley Industries was poised to merge with. This merger would create the largest sustainable energy conglomerate in the Midwest, positioning them to revolutionize the industry. "Good morning, everyone," Violet began, her voice clear and confident. "Today, we stand on the precipice of a new era in sustainable energy." As Violet launched into her presentation, she could feel the energy in the room shift. Skepticism gave way to interest, then to excitement as she laid out her vision for the future. Graphs and projections flashed across the screens, illustrating the potential impact of their combined resources and innovation. Just as she was building to her conclusion, a commotion outside the conference room caught everyone's attention. Raised voices and the sound of a scuffle penetrated the thick doors. Violet's heart raced, a familiar dread creeping up her spine. She had a sinking feeling she knew exactly who was causing the disturbance. The doors burst open, and Spencer Blackwood stumbled in looking disheveled and wild-eyed. Security guards were right behind him, reaching to restrain him. "Don't touch me," Spencer snarled, shrugging off their grasp. His bloodshot eyes locked onto Violet. "You think you can just erase me, Violet? Pretend I never existed?" The room had gone deathly silent, all eyes darting between Spencer and Violet. She could see the shock and confusion on the faces of the Green Tech representatives, the growing alarm among her own board members. For a split second, Violet felt a flicker of the old fear, the instinct to cower and appease. But it passed as quickly as it came, replaced by a burning resolve. She would not let Spencer derail everything she had worked for. Not again. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, her voice steady and authoritative, "you are interrupting a private business meeting. I'm going to have to ask you to leave immediately." Spencer let out a bitter laugh. "Leave? Oh no, darling. I'm not going anywhere until I've had my say." He turned to address the room at large. "Did she tell you all about how she built this company? How she clawed her way to the top? Let me fill you in on some details she might have left out." As Spencer launched into a tirade of accusations and half-truths, Violet's mind raced. She could see the uncertainty creeping into the eyes of the Green Tech executives. Everything she had worked for was balanced on a knife's edge. But then, something unexpected happened. Jordan, who had been sitting quietly in the corner of the room, observing the proceedings as part of his business education, stood up. "Enough," he shouted, his young voice cracking with emotion. All eyes turned to him, including Spencer's. who seemed taken aback by the interruption. Jordan walked to stand beside Violet, his shoulders squared, chin lifted in defiance. "I've sat by and watched you try to destroy my sister for years, Spencer. Not anymore. You want to talk about how this company was built? Let me tell you." With a passion and eloquence that belied his years, Jordan began to speak. He recounted the countless nights Violet had worked tirelessly to save the company after Spencer's embezzlement nearly ruined it. He spoke of her dedication to sustainable practices, her commitment to her employees, and her unwavering integrity in the face of adversity. "My sister," Jordan concluded, his voice thick with emotion, "is the strongest, most compassionate person I know. She took a company on the brink of collapse and turned it into a beacon of innovation and hope. If anyone in this room doubts her ability to lead this merger and take us all into a brighter future, then you're not paying attention." A stunned silence followed Jordan's speech. Violet felt tears pricking at her eyes, overwhelmed by her brother's support and the raw truth of his words. The spell was broken by slow, deliberate applause. It was coming from Gerald Winters, the CEO of Green Tech Solutions. He stood, his eyes locked on Violet. "Ms. Hartley," he said, his voice carrying easily across the silent room, "when we first considered this merger, we were impressed by your company's financials and innovation. But what I see here today, the loyalty you inspire, the strength of character you display under pressure, that's something you can't put a price on." He turned to Spencer, his expression hardening. "Mr. Blackwood, I suggest you leave now, before we're forced to call the authorities." Spencer's face contorted with rage. For a moment it seemed he might lash out physically, but then, as if all the fight had suddenly drained out of him, his shoulders slumped. "This isn't over, Violet," he muttered. But the threat sounded hollow, defeated. As security escorted Spencer out, Violet took a deep breath, centering herself. She turned to address the room, acutely aware that how she handled the next few moments could determine the fate of the merger. "I want to apologize for that interruption," she began, her voice steady. "What you just witnessed is, unfortunately, a remnant of a painful chapter in my personal history. But it's also a testament to the resilience of this company and the people who make it great." She walked around the table, making eye contact with each person in the room. Hartley Industries has faced challenges that would have broken lesser companies. We've weathered financial storms, personal vendettas, and attempts at sabotage. And yet here we stand, stronger than ever. Why? Because we're not just a company, we're a vision for a better future. As Violet continued, she could see the mood in the room shifting. The uncertainty caused by Spencer's outburst was being replaced by a renewed energy and focus. "This merger isn't just about combining assets or expanding market share," she said, her passion evident in every word. "It's about pooling our collective knowledge, resources, and vision to create real, lasting change in the world. Together we can revolutionize the energy sector, make sustainable living a reality for millions, and leave a legacy that will benefit generations to come." As she concluded her impromptu speech, Violet could feel the electricity in the air. The Green Tech executives were leaning forward, engaged and excited. Her own board members looked on with a mixture of pride and awe. Gerald Winters stood once again, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Ms. Hartley, I think I speak for all of us at Green Tech when I say that we came here today expecting to discuss a business transaction. What we've witnessed instead is a display of leadership that goes far beyond balance sheets and projections." He extended his hand towards her. "We'd be honored to move forward with this merger." The room erupted in applause. As Violet shook Gerald's hand, sealing the deal that would change the course of both their companies, she felt a profound sense of triumph. Not just over the successful merger, but over every obstacle that had tried to hold her back. As the excitement died down and people began to file out of the conference room, Violet found herself face to face with Jordan. Without a word, she pulled her brother into a tight embrace. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "What you did. Jordan, I'm so proud of you." Jordan hugged her back fiercely. "I meant every word, Vi. You're my hero, you know that." As they pulled apart, Violet saw Nolan approaching, his face beaming with pride. "That," he said, gesturing to encompass the room and everything that had just transpired, "was absolutely incredible. Both of you." Before Violet could respond, her phone buzzed with an incoming call. Her brow furrowed as she saw the caller ID. It was the police department. "Ms. Hartley?" The officer's voice came through clearly. "We're calling to inform you that Spencer Blackwood has been taken into custody. After leaving your office, he was involved in an altercation at a local bar. During the arrest, officers found evidence linking him to a series of cyber attacks against your company." Violet's mind reeled. The mysterious system breaches, the leaked information, it all suddenly made sense. "Thank you, officer," she managed to say. "I'll come down to the station to give a statement." As she ended the call, Violet turned to Nolan and Jordan, her expression a mix of shock and relief. "It's over," she said softly. "They've arrested Spencer. He was behind the cyber attacks on the company." Nolan's face darkened with concern. "The ones we could never trace? Violet, that's serious corporate espionage. He could be looking at significant jail time." The realization hit Violet like a wave. Spencer, the man who had once been her husband, who had abused and betrayed her, was now facing the consequences of his actions in a way she had never anticipated. "I need to go to the station," she said, her mind already racing with the implications. "Nolan, can you handle things here? Make sure the Green Tech team has everything they need to start the merger proceedings?" Nolan nodded, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. "Of course. Do you want me to come with you to the station?" Violet considered for a moment, then shook her head. "No, I think this is something I need to do alone. Jordan, will you be okay heading home with Mrs. Thompson?" Jordan nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Go do what you need to do, Vi. I'll be fine." As Violet made her way to the police station, her emotions were in turmoil. The triumph of the successful merger, the lingering adrenaline from Spencer's interruption, the shock of his arrest, it all swirled together in a dizzying cocktail. At the station, she was led to an interview room where a detective was waiting. As she answered questions and provided information about Spencer's past actions and the recent cyber attacks, Violet felt as if she were watching herself from outside her body. It all seemed surreal. "Ms. Hartley," the detective said, his tone softening slightly. "Given Mr. Blackwood's history of abuse and the nature of these new charges, the prosecutor is likely to seek maximum penalties, but they've indicated that he's willing to consider a plea deal if Mr. Blackwood cooperates fully and agrees to certain conditions." Violet's breath caught in her throat. What kind of conditions? A restraining order that would extend nationwide mandatory counseling, and most importantly, a full confession and public apology for his actions against you and Hartley Industries. The thought of Spencer admitting his wrongs publicly, of finally being held accountable for years of abuse and manipulation, was almost too much to process. Can I see him?" The words were out of Violet's mouth before she had fully formed the thought. The detective looked surprised but nodded. "If you're sure, we can arrange that. But Ms. Hartley, given your history, I have to advise against it." Violet shook her head. "I need to do this. For closure, if nothing else." Minutes later, Violet found herself seated across from Spencer in a small, stark room. The man before her was a far cry from the polished, confident figure who had once dominated her life. His eyes were bloodshot, his expensive suit rumpled and stained. "Come to gloat, Violet." Spencer's voice was bitter but lacked its usual venom. Violet studied him for a long moment before speaking. "No, Spencer, I came to understand. Why? After everything, why couldn't you just let go?" Spencer let out a harsh laugh. "Let go? You took everything from me, Violet. My money, my reputation, my future. What was I supposed to do? Just fade away into obscurity?" "I took nothing from you, Spencer," Violet replied, her voice steady. "Everything you lost because of your own actions. The abuse, the embezzlement, the lies, those were all your choices." For a moment, something flickered in Spencer's eyes, a hint of the vulnerability she had glimpsed in the early days of their relationship. "I loved you, in my own way." Violet felt a pang in her chest, not of longing or regret, but of pity. If that was love, Spencer, then you have no idea what real love is. Real love builds you up, it doesn't tear you down. It encourages you to be your best self, not a shadow of who you could be. She leaned forward, her gaze intense. "I'm not here to convince you to take the plea deal or to beg for an apology. I'm here to tell you that I'm free. Free of your influence, your threats, your shadow, whatever you choose to do now, it won't change that." Spencer's facade cracked, anger and desperation bleeding through. "You think you've won? That this merger makes you untouchable? I still have friends in high places, Violet. This isn't over. Violet stood, smoothing down her suit. She looked at Spencer not with fear or anger, but with a mixture of pity and resolve. Yes, Spencer, it is over. Not because of the merger or your arrest or anything external. It's over because I've chosen to end it. Your threats, your schemes, they have no power over me anymore. As she turned to leave, Spencer called out, his voice cracking. Violet, wait, I'm sorry for everything. Violet paused at the door, looking back at the broken man before her. I hope you mean that, Spencer. Not for my sake, but for yours. Goodbye. As she walked out of the police station, Violet felt as if a weight she hadn't even realized she was carrying had been lifted from her shoulders. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, a fitting backdrop to what felt like the final chapter of a long, difficult journey. Her phone buzzed with a text from Nolan. Everything okay? Do you need me to pick you up? Violet smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. I'm okay, she typed back. Better than okay, actually. I'm heading home now. Will you and Jordan be there? Nolan's response came quickly. We're here with dinner ready. Take your time. We'll be waiting. As Violet made her way home, her mind was already racing with plans for the future. The merger with Green Tech opened up countless possibilities, not just for Hartley Industries, but for advancing sustainable technology on a scale she had only dreamed of before. But more than that, she felt a profound sense of personal freedom. The shadows that had haunted her for so long, the fear, the self-doubt, the lingering trauma of her time with Spencer, seemed to have dissipated in the light of this new day. As she entered her apartment, the smell of home-cooked food and the sound of laughter greeted her. Jordan and Nolan were in the kitchen, playfully arguing over the best way to plate the dinner they had prepared. Vi! Jordan exclaimed, rushing over to hug her. Are you okay? What happened at the police station? Violet hugged him back tightly, then reached out to include Nolan in the embrace. I'm more than okay, she said, her voice filled with warmth and certainty. I'm free. As they sat down to dinner, Violet looked at the two most important people in her life, her brilliant, compassionate brother, and the man who had stood by her through every challenge, whose love had helped her rediscover her own strength. In that moment, surrounded by love and the promise of a bright future, Violet Hartley knew that she had not just survived, but truly triumphed. The road ahead would undoubtedly hold new challenges, but Violet was ready to face them head-on. She had reclaimed her voice, her power, and her future, and this time nothing and no one would take them away again. As they enjoyed their meal together, Violet shared the details of her encounter with Spencer at the police station. Jordan listened intently, his brow furrowed with concern, while Nolan reached out to hold her hand supportively. So, it's really over? Jordan asked, a mix of hope and disbelief in his voice. Violet nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. It's over. At least this chapter. Spencer will face the consequences of his actions, and we get to move forward. Nolan squeezed her hand gently. You handled that with incredible grace, Violet. I'm in awe of your strength. We both are, Jordan chimed in, his eyes shining with admiration for his sister. Violet felt a wave of emotion wash over her. I couldn't have done any of this without you two. You've been my rocks through all of this. As the evening wore on, their conversation shifted to lighter topics. Jordan's upcoming science fair project, Nolan's ideas for implementing new sustainable technologies in their office building, and Violet's vision for the future of the newly merged company. Later that night, as Violet stood on her balcony looking out over the Indianapolis skyline, Nolan joined her, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Penny, for your thoughts, he murmured, resting his chin on her shoulder. Violet leaned back into his embrace, sighing contentedly. I'm just processing everything. It feels like the end of one journey and the beginning of another. Nolan nodded, understanding in his voice. It is, and whatever comes next, we'll face it together. Violet turned in his arms, looking up into his warm brown eyes. Nolan, I love you. I think I have for a long time, but I was too afraid to admit it, even to myself. A brilliant smile spread across Nolan's face. I love you too, Violet, more than I can express. As they shared a tender kiss under the starlit sky, Violet felt a sense of peace and rightness settle over her. The future stretched out before her, full of promise and possibility. The next morning, Violet woke early, feeling refreshed and energized. As she prepared for the day ahead, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. The woman looking back at her stood tall, confidence radiating from her every pore. Gone was the shadow of fear that had lingered in her eyes for so long. At the office, there was a palpable buzz of excitement. The news of the merger had spread, and employees were eager to hear about what it would mean for the company's future. Violet called an all-hands meeting, standing before her assembled team with pride and purpose. "Today marks the beginning of a new era for Hartley Industries," she began, her voice clear and strong. "Our merger with Green Tech Solutions isn't just a business move. It's a commitment to a sustainable future, to innovation that will change lives, and to being a force for good in the world." As she outlined her vision for the company's future, Violet could see the enthusiasm building in her employees' eyes. She spoke of new research initiatives, expanded community outreach programs, and ambitious goals for reducing carbon emissions. "But most importantly," she concluded, "I want each of you to know how valued you are. This company's strength lies not just in our technology or our resources, but in the passionate, dedicated people who come to work every day ready to make a difference. Together, there's no limit to what we can achieve." The applause that followed was thunderous, filled with genuine excitement and commitment. As the day progressed, Violet found herself in a whirlwind of meetings, calls, and strategy sessions. But unlike in the past, when such days would have left her drained and overwhelmed, she felt invigorated by each new challenge. Late in the afternoon, as she was reviewing some financial projections with her CFO, her phone buzzed with a news alert. Her heart skipped a beat as she read the headline, "Tech mogul Spencer Blackwood pleads guilty to cybercrime and harassment charges." Excusing herself, Violet stepped out onto the small private balcony adjoining her office. As she read through the article, detailing Spencer's plea deal and public apology, she felt a complex mix of emotions, relief, vindication, and a touch of sadness for the man she had once loved. But overriding it all was a sense of closure. This chapter of her life was truly finally over. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Violet took a deep breath, letting the cool evening air fill her lungs. She thought about how far she had come, about the challenges she had overcome, and about the bright future that lay ahead. In that moment, standing high above the city she loved, Violet Hartley made a silent vow to herself. She would use her experiences, her strength and her resources to help others who were struggling as she once had. She would continue to push for innovation and sustainability, not just in technology, but in how businesses operated and treated their employees. Most of all, she promised herself that she would never again let fear hold her back from living her fullest, most authentic life. As she turned to go back inside, ready to tackle whatever challenges the future might hold, Violet felt a profound sense of peace and purpose. She had not just survived, she had triumphed, and the best was yet to come. The gentle hum of machines and the soft beeping of monitors filled the hospital room. Violet Hartley sat in a comfortable chair, cradling her newborn son Lucas in her arms. Nolan stood beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder, his eyes filled with wonder as he gazed at their child. "He's perfect," Nolan whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Violet looked up at him, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "He is, isn't he? I never thought I could feel this much love." As she gazed down at Lucas, his tiny fingers wrapping around her own, Violet marveled at how much her life had changed in the 3 years since the merger with Green Tech Solutions. The company had flourished beyond her wildest dreams, becoming a leader in sustainable technology and setting new standards for corporate responsibility. But more than that, Violet herself had blossomed. The fear and self-doubt that had once plagued her were gone, replaced by a quiet confidence and inner peace. Her relationship with Nolan had deepened, their love growing stronger with each passing day. And now, with the birth of their son, she felt as if her heart might burst with happiness. A soft knock at the door interrupted her reverie. Jordan poked his head in, his face breaking into a wide grin as he saw his nephew. "Hey, big sister," he said softly, entering the room. "How's my favorite nephew doing?" Violet smiled warmly at her brother. At 18, Jordan had grown into a handsome young man, his intelligence and compassion reminiscent of their father. "He's perfect, Jordan. Want to hold him?" As Jordan carefully took Lucas into his arms, Violet couldn't help but reflect on how their relationship had evolved. The protective instinct she had always felt towards her little brother had transformed into a deep, mutual respect and friendship. "You're a natural," Nolan observed, watching Jordan with the baby. Jordan chuckled softly. "Well, I did have a pretty amazing role model in the whole older sibling department." Violet felt her heart swell with pride. "Speaking of which, have you made a decision about college yet?" Jordan nodded, his eyes still fixed on Lucas. "I have, actually. I've decided to accept the offer from MIT. Their environmental engineering program is exactly what I'm looking for." "Jordan, that's wonderful," Violet exclaimed, her voice filled with genuine excitement. "I'm so proud of you." "Thanks, Vi," Jordan replied, finally looking up at her. "I couldn't have done it without you. You've always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." As they continued to chat, catching up on Jordan's plans for the future and discussing the changes that Lucas would bring to all their lives, Violet felt a sense of contentment wash over her. This was what family was supposed to be: supportive, loving, and full of joy. Their conversation was interrupted by another knock at the door. This time it was Dr. Patel, Violet's obstetrician. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said with a warm smile. "I just wanted to check in and see how our new mother is doing." As Dr. Patel examined Violet and Lucas, pronouncing them both in excellent health, Violet couldn't help but think about how different this experience was from what she had once imagined. Years ago, when she was with Spencer, the thought of having a child had filled her with anxiety and fear. Now, surrounded by love and support, she felt nothing but joy and excitement for the future. Later that evening, after Jordan had left and Lucas was sleeping peacefully in his hospital bassinet, Violet and Nolan had a moment alone. They stood by the window, looking out at the twinkling lights of Indianapolis, their arms wrapped around each other. "I never thought I could be this happy," Violet murmured, leaning her head on Nolan's shoulder. Nolan pressed a soft kiss to her temple. "You deserve all the happiness in the world, Violet. You've worked so hard and overcome so much." Violet turned to face him, her eyes serious. "We've overcome it together, Nolan. I couldn't have done any of this without you." As they shared a tender kiss, Violet's mind drifted to how far she had come. From the terrified, broken woman she had been at the end of her marriage to Spencer, to the confident, successful CEO, and now mother she was today. The journey hadn't been easy, but every step had been worth it. The next few months were a whirlwind of sleepless nights, diaper changes, and the indescribable joy of watching Lucas grow and change every day. Violet threw herself into motherhood with the same passion and dedication she brought to her work, finding a balance that allowed her to excel in both roles. Hartley Industries continued to thrive under her leadership, with Nolan by her side as both her personal and professional partner. They launched new initiatives focusing on renewable energy in developing countries, partnered with educational institutions to foster the next generation of environmental scientists, and set industry-leading standards for ethical business practices. One sunny afternoon, as Violet was working from home, Lucas napping peacefully in his crib nearby, her phone rang. The caller ID showed it was her lawyer, Margaret Chen. "Violet," Margaret's voice came through, sounding hesitant. "I have some news about Spencer." Violet felt her heart rate quicken slightly, but the panic she might have once felt at the mention of his name was absent. "What is it, Margaret?" "He's ill, Violet. Terminal cancer. His lawyer reached out to me because, well, Spencer's asking to see you. One last time." The news hit Violet like a physical blow. Despite everything Spencer had done, the thought of him facing death alone stirred something in her. Not love, not even pity exactly, but a kind of compassion she hadn't expected to feel. I need to think about this, Margaret," Violet said, her mind racing. "Can I call you back?" After hanging up, Violet sat in silence for a long moment, her thoughts swirling. Should she go see Spencer? Could she face him again? And if she did, what would she say? The sound of Lucas stirring in his crib pulled her from her thoughts. As she lifted her son into her arms, inhaling his sweet baby scent, Violet felt a clarity settle over her. She knew what she needed to do. That evening, after putting Lucas to bed, Violet sat down with Nolan in their living room. She told him about Spencer's condition and his request to see her. Nolan listened intently, his brow furrowed with concern. "Violet, you don't owe him anything. After everything he put you through, no one would blame you for refusing to see him." Violet nodded, reaching out to take Nolan's hand. "I know, and a part of me wants to refuse, but I think I need to do this. Not for Spencer, but for myself, to truly close this chapter of my life." Nolan squeezed her hand gently. "If that's what you feel is right, then I support you completely. Do you want me to come with you?" Violet smiled, feeling a rush of love for this man who always put her needs first. "Thank you, but no. This is something I need to do on my own." The next day, Violet found herself walking down the sterile hallway of the hospital's oncology ward. Her heels clicked against the linoleum floor, each step bringing her closer to a confrontation she never thought she'd have again. As she entered Spencer's room, she was struck by how small and frail he looked in the hospital bed. The man who had once loomed so large in her life, who had seemed to hold so much power over her, now appeared diminished and weak. Spencer's eyes widened as he saw her. "Violet," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You came." Violet moved to sit in the chair beside his bed, her posture straight, her expression composed. "Hello, Spencer. Your lawyer said you wanted to see me." Spencer nodded weakly. I didn't think you'd come. After everything, I almost didn't," Violet admitted. "But I realized that I needed this closure as much as you do." For a moment, they sat in silence, the weight of their shared history hanging between them. Finally, Spencer spoke again, his voice strained. "I'm sorry, Violet, for everything. The abuse, the manipulation, the sabotage. I know it doesn't change anything, but I need you to know that I regret it all." Violet studied him carefully, searching for any sign of the manipulation she had become so adept at recognizing. But all she saw was genuine remorse in his tired eyes. "Thank you for saying that, Spencer," she said softly. "I won't pretend that it erases the past, or that it makes everything okay, but I appreciate your apology." Spencer nodded, a single tear escaping down his gaunt cheek. "I've had a lot of time to think in here, about the kind of man I was, the things I did. I destroyed the best thing in my life because of my own insecurities and greed." Violet felt a complex mix of emotions wash over her. Sadness for the man Spencer could have been, anger at the years of pain he had caused her, and a surprising sense of pity for the broken figure before her. "Spencer," she began, choosing her words carefully, "what you did was inexcusable. You hurt me in ways that took years to heal from. But I want you to know that I have healed. I've built a life that I love with people who truly care for me, and in doing so, I've found the strength to forgive you." Spencer's eyes widened in surprise. "Forgive me? After everything?" Violet nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Not for your sake, but for mine. Holding on to that anger and pain was only hurting me. By forgiving you, I'm finally letting go of the last hold you had over me." Tears were flowing freely down Spencer's face now. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, Violet, but thank you. Knowing that you've found happiness and it brings me peace." They talked for a while longer, not as former spouses or enemies, but as two people acknowledging the complex tapestry of their shared past. Violet told him about Lucas, about the company's success, about the life she had built. Spencer listened, occasionally asking questions, his eyes filled with a mix of regret and genuine happiness for her. As Violet prepared to leave, Spencer reached out, his hand trembling slightly. "Violet, thank you for coming, for giving me a chance to apologize. I know it doesn't change the past, but I hope it helps you move forward." Violet gently took his hand, giving it a small squeeze. "It does, Spencer. I hope you find peace in whatever time you have left." As she walked out of the hospital, Violet felt as if a weight she hadn't even realized she was still carrying had been lifted from her shoulders. The forgiveness she had offered Spencer wasn't just for him. It was a gift to herself, the final step in her journey of healing. The weeks that followed were filled with a renewed sense of purpose for Violet. Her experience with Spencer had reinforced her commitment to using her position and resources to help others who were struggling as she once had. She spearheaded a new initiative at Hartley Industries, partnering with domestic violence shelters and organizations that supported survivors of abuse. The company began offering job training programs, legal support, and financial assistance to help individuals rebuild their lives after leaving abusive situations. One evening, as Violet was putting the finishing touches on a presentation for this new initiative, Nolan came into her home office, Lucas cradled in his arms. "I think someone's missing his mom," Nolan said with a smile, passing their son to Violet. As Violet cuddled Lucas close, inhaling his sweet baby scent, she felt a wave of love and contentment wash over her. "I was just finishing up," she said, smiling up at Nolan. "Want to hear about the new program?" Nolan pulled up a chair beside her, his eyes warm with interest and pride. "Always." As Violet outlined her plans, her voice filled with passion and determination, Lucas cooed and gurgled in her arms, as if offering his own encouragement. "Violet, this is amazing," Nolan said when she had finished. "You're going to change so many lives with this." Violet leaned over to kiss him softly. "We are. I couldn't do any of this without your support, Nolan." As they sat there together, their little family unit complete and happy, Violet reflected on the long journey that had brought her to this moment. From the darkest days of her marriage to Spencer, through the struggles to reclaim her company and her sense of self, to the joy of finding true love with Nolan and the miracle of their son, every step, every challenge had led her here. The following week, Violet stood on a stage at a charity gala, preparing to announce Hartley Industries' new initiative. As she looked out at the sea of faces, colleagues, friends, supporters, she felt a surge of gratitude and purpose. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice clear and strong, "tonight I want to talk to you about the power of second chances, about the strength it takes to leave an abusive situation and the support needed to rebuild a life afterwards." As she shared her own story, not as a victim but as a survivor and thriver, Violet could see the impact her words were having. There were tears in many eyes, nods of understanding, and a palpable sense of hope filling the room. "That's why I'm proud to announce the launch of the Phoenix Project," Violet continued, her voice filled with passion. "This initiative will provide comprehensive support to survivors of domestic abuse, from job training and legal aid to housing assistance and counseling, because everyone deserves the chance to rise from the ashes of their past and build a brighter future." The applause that followed was thunderous, filled with genuine enthusiasm and support. As Violet stepped down from the stage, she was immediately engulfed in a warm hug from Jordan. "I'm so proud of you, Vi," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Mom and Dad would be too." Violet hugged him back tightly, feeling a lump form in her throat. "Thank you, Jordan. That means more than you know." As the evening progressed, Violet found herself surrounded by well-wishers and supporters, each eager to contribute to the Phoenix Project. But amid the excitement and congratulations, her eyes kept drifting to where Nolan stood, holding Lucas, both of them beaming with pride. Later that night, as they drove home, Nolan reached over to take Violet's hand. "You were incredible tonight," he said softly. "You're changing lives, Violet, not just with the company's success, but by sharing your story, by showing others that it's possible to overcome and thrive." Violet squeezed his hand, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "I couldn't have done it without you, Nolan. You've been my rock through all of this." As they pulled into their driveway, Violet paused for a moment, looking up at the home they had built together. It was more than just a house. It was a symbol of everything she had achieved, of the life she had fought so hard to create. Inside, as they tucked Lucas into his crib, Violet felt a profound sense of peace wash over her. This was what she had always wanted, what she had once thought was beyond her reach. A loving family, a fulfilling career, a life filled with purpose and joy. Later, as she and Nolan lay in bed, Violet found herself reflecting on the long journey that had brought her to this point. She thought about the scared, broken woman she had once been, trapped in a cycle of abuse and self-doubt. She thought about the challenges she had faced in reclaiming her company and her sense of self. And she thought about the incredible support system she had found along the way, Jordan's unwavering love, Nolan's steadfast partnership, and the friends and colleagues who had believed in her even when she struggled to believe in herself. "What are you thinking about?" Nolan asked softly, noticing her pensive expression. Violet turned to him, a small smile playing on her lips. "Just everything. How far I've come. How different my life is now compared to what I once thought was possible." Nolan pulled her close, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "You've always had this strength inside you, Violet. I'm just glad you finally see it for yourself." As she drifted off to sleep in Nolan's arms, Violet felt a sense of excitement for the future. The Phoenix Project was just the beginning. She had plans to expand Hartley Industries' philanthropic efforts, to use her platform to advocate for survivors of abuse, to continue pushing for innovation in sustainable technology. But more than that, she was excited for the simple joys of watching Lucas grow, of building a life with Nolan, of being there for Jordan as he embarked on his own journey at MIT. She had learned that true success wasn't measured in dollars or accolades, but in the lives you touched and the love you shared. As the first light of dawn began to creep through the curtains, Violet Hartley smiled in her sleep. She had not just survived, she had triumphed, and the best was yet to come. 5 years later, the sun was setting over Indianapolis, casting a warm golden glow across the city skyline. Violet Hartley stood on the rooftop garden of Hartley Industries headquarters, surrounded by the lush greenery and solar panels that had become a hallmark of the company's commitment to sustainability. At 42, she exuded a quiet confidence and grace that spoke of her journey and triumphs. "Mommy, look!" 5-year-old Lucas tugged at her hand, pointing excitedly at a butterfly landing on a nearby flower. "It's just like the ones in your story." Violet smiled, crouching down beside her son. "It is, sweetheart. Do you remember what the butterfly means in Mommy's story?" Lucas scrunched up his face in concentration, his honey-colored eyes, so like Violet's own, sparkling with intelligence. "It means change and being strong." "That's right," Violet praised, ruffling his hair affectionately. "It's about transformation and resilience, just like you're growing and changing every day." As Lucas ran off to explore more of the rooftop garden, Violet straightened up, her hand resting lightly on her swollen belly. At 7 months pregnant with their second child, she felt a sense of joy and anticipation that still amazed her. "There's my 2 favorite people," Nolan's voice came from behind her. He wrapped his arms around her, hands gently cradling her bump. "How are you feeling?" Violet leaned back into his embrace, sighing contentedly. "Wonderful. Just taking a moment to appreciate everything." And there was so much to appreciate. In the 5 years since the launch of the Phoenix Project, Hartley Industries had become a global leader, not just in sustainable technology, but in corporate social responsibility. The company's initiatives had helped thousands of survivors of domestic abuse rebuild their lives, while their technological innovations were making significant strides in combating climate change. But more than the professional successes, it was the personal growth that filled Violet with the most pride. She had watched Jordan flourish at MIT, graduating with honors and now working on groundbreaking research in environmental engineering. Her relationship with Nolan had deepened, their partnership a source of strength and joy in both their personal and professional lives. As the small family made their way back inside, Violet's eye caught the framed magazine cover hanging in her office. "Violet Hartley, Rising from the Ashes," the headline read, accompanied by a photo of Violet looking strong and determined. The article had been a turning point, her decision to publicly share her story of survival and triumph, inspiring countless others to seek help and reclaim their lives. Later that evening, as Violet tucked Lucas into bed, he asked for his favorite bedtime story, the tale of the butterfly that Violet had written, a metaphor for her own journey of transformation. "Once upon a time," Violet began, her voice soft and warm, "there was a caterpillar who thought she would never be anything more than what she was." As she recounted the story of the caterpillar's struggles, its time in the chrysalis, and its eventual emergence as a beautiful butterfly, Violet felt the familiar surge of emotion. This simple children's tale encapsulated so much of her own experience, the pain, the growth, and the ultimate triumph. And as the butterfly spread its wings for the first time, Violet concluded, it realized that all the hardships it had faced had made it strong. It was no longer afraid, because it knew that it could weather any storm. Lucas's eyes were heavy with sleep, but he mumbled, "Just like you, Mommy. You're the strongest butterfly." Violet felt tears prick at her eyes as she kissed her son's forehead. "We're all strong in our own ways, sweetheart, and together, we're even stronger." After Lucas had drifted off to sleep, Violet made her way to the home office she shared with Nolan. He was there, reviewing some documents for their latest green energy project. "Lucas asleep?" he asked, looking up with a smile. Violet nodded, lowering herself into the comfortable chair beside him. "Out like a light. The butterfly story works every time." Nolan reached out to take her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "It's a powerful story, just like its author." For a moment, they sat in comfortable silence, the weight of their shared history and the brightness of their future hanging in the air between them. "I got a call from the shelter today," Violet said softly. "Remember Maria, the woman we helped last year? She's starting her own business, a small cafe." Nolan's face lit up with genuine happiness. That's wonderful news. Will the Phoenix Project be providing any support? Violet nodded, a sense of pride swelling in her chest. Seed funding and mentorship. She's already talking about wanting to hire other survivors to pay it forward. This was the ripple effect Violet had always hoped for. Survivors not just rebuilding their own lives, but reaching back to help others do the same. It was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a truth Violet had lived herself. As the night deepened around them, Violet found herself reflecting on the long journey that had brought her to this point. From the terrified woman trapped in an abusive marriage, to the determined CEO fighting to reclaim her company, to the confident leader and loving mother she was today, every step, every struggle had shaped her. "What are you thinking about?" Nolan asked, noticing her pensive expression. Violet smiled, squeezing his hand. "Just gratitude for where I am, for the people in my life, for the opportunity to make a difference." Nolan leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to her temple. "You've worked hard for all of this, Violet. You should be proud." "I am," she said, her voice filled with quiet conviction. "But I'm also aware that none of us get here alone. I'm grateful for you, for Jordan, for every person who believed in me, even when I struggled to believe in myself." As they sat together, planning for the future of their family and their company, Violet felt a profound sense of peace. The journey hadn't been easy, but every hardship had led her here, to a life filled with love, purpose, and the opportunity to help others find their own strength. In the quiet of the night, with the city twinkling below and the promise of a new day ahead, Violet hardly realized that her story was far from over. Like the butterfly in her tail, she had emerged from her chrysalis stronger and more beautiful than she could have imagined. And now, with wings spread wide, she was ready to soar. Not just for herself, but for all those who needed to see that transformation was possible, that pain could lead to growth, and that even in the darkest times, hope could bloom. As she drifted off to sleep that night, Violet's last thoughts were of the future, not just her own, but the futures she was helping to shape through her work and her example. In that moment, she knew with absolute certainty that the scared, broken woman she had once been would be proud of the phoenix she had become. And in that knowledge, Violet found her greatest strength and her most profound peace. If this story touched your heart, and you want to keep following inspiring and moving stories, be sure to check out our upcoming videos, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications to stay updated on new content that can brighten your journey and provide valuable insights. Join us and keep exploring stories that truly matter. I'm sure the next video that pops up on your screen will touch you as well, so click on it now, and we'll see you there.